couple of things to discuss tonight. I'm going to gavel, just for fun. All right, so tonight our workshop largely focuses on engaging with the community. So if you'll look at board docs, we're discussing developing the community engagement plan for the board, the linkage plan, which is kind of part of that, and then a discussion of student representatives on the board. And we can take that in any order that makes sense for board members. Is there one that people are eager to discuss first? What do you want to do first?
Why don't I do the student representative?
Okay.
Sure.
Let's do that one. So, I will say that when I came on the board, I think was the year that the student representatives were paused to evaluate whether that, position, if you call it, was serving the purpose that the board intended, and also that, was it also beneficial for the students who were serving as representatives. I believe that those were the primary reasons why it was paused. Brad, does that sound familiar?
Well, I think we paused it during COVID.
Did we have two board members
No, I think we had two board members,
Zoom
right?
in?
Partly through COVID. Yeah, that was the last two. We had a central rep and a Logan rep.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think it was pointed out also that we have a Polytechnic as a high school and didn't have a rep from Polytechnic, and there was some desire from board members to find a way to engage with students effectively, and there was thoughts that maybe serving as student representatives wasn't meeting that purpose. I believe does that sound right to you? Okay. So here we are, a couple of years out. Dr. Engel, I believe you had found a different way to engage with students, but that has kind of sat in the administrative realm, not necessarily with the board. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so those meetings with the Student Senate were a direct result of that. Tried to meet quarterly. The first quarter this last year didn't quite work out as the group was still kind of forming and norming, and they've got their own work to do as well in those meetings that they get together. They don't always want to see the superintendent and be distracted by that stuff. And so it was a way to engage students in the topics they were interested in. The things that they're particularly interested in are generally more administrative in nature, less driven by policy. And, with the student board members that I've experienced over many years, some of them are, very keyed in and excited to be there. And others are, super busy kids that have lots of stuff going on, and practices interfere in games and performances, and sometimes it's tough for those students to make regular board meetings, and then they feel guilty, but they're still trying to do their part. And so you get different experiences depending on the students' time, availability, and interest. So the thought was that by going to students, we'd see more students and be able to dive into the topics that they were interested in, more administrative in nature. It's not necessarily school lunch, but, what's going on with this facility thing? What's that referendum thing that's going on? Can you answer questions about the school resource officer program? There's all sorts of questions that they have, the same ones that our parents do as well. And a lot of those are kind of more in the weeds about what's going on with them and in their life. And so that was a strategy, different one. Certainly have recognized the value of board member reps as well over the years, and have seen students contribute greatly to that, but it all kind of depends on the year and the students that are involved.
There's some context. Can't go back too far in history because I've only been here. It's my third year. So I guess I'll turn it over to the board to discuss. I think the policy still shows student reps. So if we wanted to change that, we would have to do policy revision. Or if we wanted to continue with that, we would have to get going on getting student reps.
I guess since I started the conversation, it's,
I'll scoot closer to the mic. It's hard for me as a parent and as a professional to engage with students. So I think it's for me, it's an avenue for us, just like when we see showcases, and to me, it's an avenue to hear from the students, or at least have them around what we're talking about. So for me, it's a way that I can engage as a board member with a small portion of the student body. So for me, if it's in I would propose to at least keep them and probably revise them to work a schedule, whether it's there's 3 reps, 1 from each school, give them 4 months each or whatever it is, and try to give them a part of the year to try and accommodate their time. But for me, I view it as another way to engage with the students. So.
Is LIG still active in the district? Are they still? Is Amber still heading it up?
unless I'm ever a random group of students.
Yeah, they're still active. They'll start organizing here as we approach the school year, and generally speaking, they identify focus topics that they're interested in for the semester, and then they'll usually come speak to us on some of those topics, and then any ad hoc things that come up. And they've been involved in school board elections as well, and helping with the
The sponsored forums.
forums. Yeah.
I too like the idea of engaging students. How we do that, we might need to get creative with, just because I think the comments of the past, like you mentioned, were some of the students involved felt it difficult to engage in ways they wanted to within the structure of our very structured meetings. Just like we sometimes feel curbed by wanting to talk about things that are top of mind for us, but they don't fit into the agenda or what we're supposed to talk about at the meeting. So maybe, I don't know, somehow we could figure out a way to include them in workshops where we can have more of a back and forth and an informal conversation. Like if we know Lit wants to present to us, could we have a workshop with them? And I don't know.
Rather than just having them on the podium for a few minutes, actually sitting down, and I would love that personally. And I tend to agree with both of what you're saying. I think the value is clear of having the opportunity to engage with the students, but I personally also think there's value in bringing students into formal, official spaces of public discourse. I think that and it is difficult to get students who want to invest in that, because I mean, nobody loves Robert's Rules of Order, except maybe me, I don't know, but and so there's always, I think, going to be a challenge of getting students, not just who can maintain the time commitment on top of all the other things, but who you feel confident and comfortable to come to those spaces. So I think there are ways that we can, not necessarily, it's not a question in my mind of having or not having student reps. I'm very much in favor of, I think, having student reps. As I remember it, the discussion hinged around the quality of the engagement we were getting and wanting to find ways to improve that. Mm-hmm. So that's where I definitely see room for support.
We do have the student linkages, which is also, I mean, it's great. We get really interesting comments and feedback. I'm not too far away. But in that like engaging, like two-way thing, like linkages are kind of tough for that, because it is just like one time you have your approved questions and you receive comments. Other comments, other ideas about this?
How are the student councils structured? Like, do they have a president, or are they both the same? Are the 3 high schools the same? Or?
They're each a little bit different. Logan has a student council, which I'm not exactly certain how it's developed or what their primary focus is. Central has a student senate, which is elected by their classmates to those offices, and then they plan events at school and engage in other, light political activity. And then Poly, I don't think has formed anything yet. Certainly an option as we move forward. The way the policy has read in terms of identifying the student rep, it's supposed to be a school-wide election, which has proved to be a challenge sometimes. There's potentially a better process from my perspective that would involve the student senate and student council nominating somebody from their ranks to serve who's interested already, or identifying somebody. The pressure to have a school-wide election has sometimes led to all right, Johnny, you got to run by administration, and getting somebody out there as opposed to maybe a more organic interest. There's also been kids who have been super excited and have run and campaigned and wanted to be a part of that. So it can go any number of ways depending on the students there that year and what the topics du jour are. So different structures in each building, different strategies then that could potentially solicit students who are interested. A lot of different ways it could go.
Having served 17 years with the representation student body at the table from each of the high schools, at that time it was LaCrosse Roads. Actually, LaCrosse Roads wasn't there all 17 years, but we included them after a while, Logan and Central. And part of the meeting, at the top of the meeting, is they provided a report of what's going on in their schools, which was very helpful for us to kind of have an idea of what's happening and hear it from the students and hear their enthusiasm about it. I remember LaCrosse Roads talking about working with some SPED kids and helping them get ready for prom. That was really cool. I just, things like that we might not ordinarily hear about. And again, to hear about it from the students, in the students' voice, I think was really important. And I kind of follow up on Dr. Sprague's comment, we are about education and giving students the opportunity to run for something, to sit at a public body, to have a voice at a public body, I think is an important thing for students to learn, to experience, to participate in, as it is important for us to engage with those students. So I really miss the students at the table, and I would love to see them back. There are times when we get in the weeds on policy, and our policies weren't as far in the weeds as they are now, which sometimes the students were less than enthused at. But oftentimes it came back to what's this policy about, and we would call on the students. If they didn't speak up, we'd say, from your perspective, how do you feel that the district is doing with communicating with students or whatever the issue is at hand? I always found that to be really important. Early on when I was on the board, the students were not being compensated. We changed our bylaws to take 10% of our compensation and pool it so that the students could have some compensation, because we knew students were struggling coming because they were like, well, I could work and make money or go to this, and so we felt the students should be compensated in some way. That is a little bit part of the history of how we got to the compensation that was not discussed when the board made that change in April. But anyway, I think it's important that they're here. It's important we have their voice. I'd love to see them back, and I think there should be compensation for them.
Which sold me. I like all that. It's helpful to hear tangible ways they were involved.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think there were flaws identified in previous boards with how it was going, and hopes to find solutions. But it seems like the perfect shouldn't be the enemy of the good, and if they are providing, good information, even if, there isn't a great way to involve them, because they can't vote on any of our monitoring reports and those sorts of things, but providing that connection piece with that, like, direct involvement in the school, I think is something that's useful, even if there are flaws. Are there any board members who are like, no, we should find a different way? Okay, then I think we're.
And as far as, I think their policy says that it's elected at large, I think each school could figure out what they want to do and let each school decide how they want to send each student. And, you know, I think each year, there's some kids that are more engaged than others, some kids that are more outgoing than others, but I still think it's important to have their voice. And I think part of that is what has kind of limited us sometimes too, is we have really brilliant kids, but they just aren't real outgoing. And I think it's our job to make sure to include them too. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, yeah, that's, I mean, I think those are all great comments. And I really like, Dr. Sprague, what you were saying about, it's not just a benefit to us, it is like a growth opportunity for students to.
Yeah, having the chance is intrinsically valuable, right, for whoever participates in it. I would go off of what Ms. Supla was saying though too, and say that it, obviously, yes, there's highly motivated, highly engaged students who are maybe already considering a political career, and this is my first foot in the door. And I think there is a concern with understanding that the voices that are represented, however many representatives we bring in, right, and from whichever cross-section of schools are always only going to be partial, right? And we should be looking for ways of engaging with groups who are finding ways to speak with the voice of disenfranchised communities of students for whatever reason. And LIT is a great example of that. So like linkages specifically with student advocacy groups, I think is something we should consider too. Or some kind, maybe not a linkage in the formal sense of it, but engaging with
Sort
them.
of meeting, yeah. All right, so we all seem to be on the same page about student representatives. I'm looking at the policy right now. It doesn't say anything in the policy explicitly about Central Logan. So we wouldn't necessarily need to modify that part to include if we wanted to open the door to Polytechnic. I think it just comes down to the process. And Ms. Steigerwald, did you say in the past when this has happened, elections happen in the spring for the
one
next
of the
year?
high schools, yes, the elections happen in the spring.
Okay. Is there, and maybe Erin, you have ideas how to do that because it's not the spring anymore?
Student Senate elections are coming up this fall, right?
They may have occurred in the spring for the following year. Often is the case.
For Student Senate?
I
At
don't know.
Central it was last fall because
Okay.
Mia ran and didn't.
Okay.
I wonder if they maybe changed their timeline,
Maybe.
potentially?
Or sometimes it's
Maybe
like
just
that.
for
I'm
freshmen.
looking something in the fall.
Maybe it's the
Oh, that
freshmen
could
are
be the
just,
timing of year,
Oh, yeah.
maybe the freshmen are just elected in the fall, that's the
That
way
could
it is
be.
at the university.
Because historically, I always had centrals come like May
Mm.
for the fall, or for the
Sure.
upcoming school year.
Yeah, it must be freshman.
Well, this year, could we get a representative from the student senate? One of the student, or this whatever they call them, I mean, not both senates, but.
I just let the principals figure it out. I don't have a preference how they work with their students. to sort that out.
I'd kind of like to see the connection of a student with their governance group, because then if there's something in there that their governance group is talking about, they would be more apt to bring it forward to us versus having somebody out here and then the governance group and those two not talking and getting here.
Yeah, I mean, and that would ensure that whoever the representatives to us are have some kind of actual voice within the student
Yeah.
body, you know, aside from being the person who comes to the meetings and makes some kind of announcement every now and then what they would do, so.
Can we physically fit in this space?
Yes.
Are there more chairs? Okay.
Yep, 2 more right here.
Does that mean you lose your spot?
I'll find them.
There used to be 4.
Yeah, there used to be 4.
Yeah.
I used to sit where Deb was sitting. I'm much better on the end.
Are we thinking 3 though? Central Oregon probably.
Yeah, well,
That's for
especially
you guys
since
to decide.
there's no big change to make to the wording of the policy to allow poly. Yeah, we should
Yeah, it just says
absolutely bring-
each district high school's student body. And it says that they're annually elected at large. So I think if we were to go forward, we need like a modified, like some sort of action to do that.
It would be good, yes, and I can pull up the administrative policy here too, because there is an administrative policy for student reps as well, which might speak to that. As Board Docs is thinking, it would be in probably the board's best interest to kind of align the language between the board policy and the administrative policy, so there's clear direction from an administrative side to know how they execute
Sure.
the selection process.
Do we
However,
want, oh, go
No, I'd
ahead.
say however the board wants to do it, we'll make sure it happens.
Do we want to reconsider the part of the policy about 3 unexcused absences and replacing the student representative? Because if that was one of the sticking points, that would keep people from saying, no, I can't commit to this. I mean, can we explore other ways for the students to remain engaged, even if they're not able to attend them in person on a regular basis? I mean, we can do virtual attendance, for instance.
It was just unexcused absences. so.
Sure, well, okay, that makes sense, yeah.
I'm pretty
If they say, I
lenient.
got a soccer game, and I've got practice, and
Mhm.
I've got to watch my little brother,
Right.
that's all fine.
I like the idea of having a representative that's sent from the student council or the student senate. It seems like a great job for them to be connecting that way, if we want to think about how to reword the policy.
I would also think it'd be beneficial to have like the announcement made by the student body, like the student government associations
Yeah.
or
This is our
making the
representative.
call, whether it's coming from their ranks or not. But if it's coming from the district administration, from the principal, it can be like, well, here's one more thing you might be able to do, coming very top down rather than, students presenting their peers with an opportunity. That might be a way of building engagement.
Well, it's like we have board members who represent at the La Crosse Public Education Foundation and at WASB, like we do that to get data from other relevant bodies and bring it here. It's a similar setup.
I mean, they could write it into the bylaws of the student government. Make it an officer position or something.
That's what we had discussed with the Student Senate at Central, if they wanted to, as an option, as we were brainstorming different ways to go.
I mean-
They talked about an officer whose job it was to go to.
Would it have to be the same student, like if the student senate or student council just wanted to send a representative and they could take it in turns, right?
Yeah.
And then they could give a report. I don't know. That's just another possibility.
A
of
rotating
attendance and-
responsibility
Right,
could work as
right.
well.
So that
And
it
then-
wasn't one student that had to have come to 24 meetings or
Right.
18 meetings, right? They could take it in, they could rotate. Or not.
If we do that, then we just have to figure out the compensation for that, because it's
Yeah.
kind of, the compensation is for term.
Yeah.
It's not a reason to not do it, we just
Right.
have to do the compensation different.
Yeah.
Quick Trip gift cards.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, gift cards.
Or like prepaid music.
No, gift cards are a bad idea. I was just.
Yeah.
That was a joke between Patty and I.
Could we?
Gift cards, yes.
So-
It should be something like a labor report, that they would not get paid for the
Mhm.
term on a regular basis like you do, but instead they fill out the labor report.
Paying people's not an issue.
Yeah.
Could we just make a donation to their organization? Essentially, it'd allow them to reward the entire organization for their engagement, rather than,
I mean, that's part of their
Create
job
some more.
often is fundraising
yeah, so,
for the
more,
things that
reinvest in
this class.
what they're
But I
doing.
I think what Ms. Soup was getting at, that this is labor,
Yeah.
right? And you should be compensated for
Well,
labor.
because they have to, a lot of them have to make a choice. Do I
Right.
work
Yeah.
that night or do I go to school board? And we didn't want that to be a reason to deter them.
No, it's a good idea.
Exact same reason we're-
No. Now, that is a policy point, we would have to write something in. So in our bylaws and salary and expenses, the language is no longer on the books about compensation for student representatives. Am I
it's taken
missing
out.
where that is?
I don't know if that part was that taken out?
It's not in there anymore.
But it wasn't
I'm
there
looking
then
at
either.
bylaws 11 on salaries and expenses, and I don't see it there, and I don't know where else it might live. So,
It was removed from the salary and expenses bylaws in April, but then the student reps, like for the actual student reps policy was tabled
Okay.
until further notice.
which is now.
Well, we could, I mean,
We don't need a policy to pay people.
We don't.
Not, it's, no, not at all.
so the only revision I'm hearing is related to how they are elected or appointed. And that would be for us to decide, election or appointment. And
We could keep our policy language a little purposefully ambiguous there,
Yeah,
to
maybe
allow
do what
for,
works
I
for
think,
them.
again, Deb, like you said, to allow
Yeah.
for them to decide the best way to do it.
what's the admin? Do you know the admin policy number?
Yep, it is 4410.2. So if you are in board docs, and you'll see there's a book at the top of the policies, you're in the Board of Education policies, if you tap that, there is administrative policies book, and that will take you to the admin policies, 4410.2.
It's a lot of policies. There.
There shall be one high school representative to the Board of Education of the School District of La Crosse from each of the district's high schools. Students shall be registered students at the high school they will represent, chosen at large from the student body of each high school in a manner similar to the actual election of regular school board members.
So by policy, the process needs to mirror a public election. So we can't necessarily have it just be part of the student governance.
Well, it also says here, will be elected the first Tuesday in April each year.
We just changed the policy.
Oh, so this is admin policy. I feel like I shouldn't dabble in
Yeah,
this.
Well,
right.
if
You
we
can
wanted
just,
to
you can
match
just change it.
Whatever the
Align them.
board's will
You will
is,
change
Yeah.
it.
we will
Adjust
adjust
the
to suit.
administrative policy, yes. The
Okay.
administrative policy is there for historical reference or example,
Sure.
but it would match what the board members.
So are we, at this point, wanting an at-large election or the nominated from the governance?
Selected by the student body as they prefer, or
Yeah.
something vague that they can select it from their student senate, they can have a special, like however each school
Yeah.
wants.
Yeah.
Selected from the
Chosen
student
from the
body would
student
allow
body.
for future boards to say, we want an at-large, whatever, like if.
I mean, we do want to avoid like a popularity contest though, right? I mean, if the goal is to have good representation, we do want to find ways of encouraging people who are underrepresented to find voice.
Mhm.
And that's, of course, the challenge of all democracy. So,
You can figure that out, we can measure how the public understands.
yeah, no, that's the next step.
Well, that's the second, we'll solve both of those this evening.
All right.
Can we just say we want a student from each high school? Figure it out easier.
I demand a child.
Is that enough guidance for administration to just decide, or do you need specific guidance in the policy of how to do it?
No, we can definitely figure it out. On the 30th, we've got a board policy workshop, it looks like, so we can draft some language to bring there to look at, so that you can fine tune the wording, and I think we know the intent, so we'll work towards that.
So generally, yes, we will have student reps. Then, as Erin suggested, we can wordsmith that policy to be how we
Each
want to
school
get
is
them.
invited, each high
Yep.
school is invited to send a student
And then,
representative.
I guess like I'm envisioning as policies are changed, we would have to have a board action in the regular meeting to change that policy. So if they're discussed in workshop, we can, is a consent agenda okay, or would we want to do matters? I guess I'd turn that over to.
According to our
board.
bylaws, we have to approve any
2 times.
changes twice.
So it certainly could, if we put the bylaws for the August 30th workshop, then we can definitely do first and second reading between the September 11th and 18th meetings.
Okay.
Okay, I'll save it for when I
Do you want to say it? There's no
Yeah, I do.
rules. Okay.
have it. I just had an idea of a way that the upside is it could help to prevent a popularity contest. The downside is we would be electing rather than the student body. But what if we ran it similar to how we filled a vacant board spot where we could open an application process for applying for a board seat, and then we interview the candidates and select one from each school.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, it takes some of the democratic agency out of the student side of the process,
Yeah.
but it does have, like, I think you're right, it has the potential for allowing a greater cross-section of students to step forward because they wouldn't be doing so very publicly in front of their peers.
Just
I feel like the students should decide who comes. I prefer that. Because that's,
Democratic engagement is always uncomfortable, right? I mean, we have to find ways to encourage people to do it despite, you know, the difficulties of it. That's true too. So.
Part of the question is how many purposes are you trying to accomplish?
Right.
Democratic process that fulfills students' democratic experience, information to the school board, information back to students. You know, each of those narrow purposes would result in a different process that led to the ideal candidate. Or you don't let perfect be the enemy of great, and just have schools pick somebody, and you'll get great people here, and they'll really enjoy their time. And you will as
Helping
well.
any chosen representative become a great representative.
Okay. So, moving on, unless there are last thoughts that people want to share. I think the community engagement plan connects with the linkage discussion directly. So, if you remember where we left off last time, a draft was passed out of ideas. After I passed that out, I had a discussion with Dr. Engel, and the district's communication department has developed a really great, very similar key stakeholders engagement plan. And I believe it's partnering with LPEF to connect with folks. So I do not want to duplicate efforts and to dip into the same pool of key stakeholders or key communicators. So I think as we think about our community engagement plan, we should, you know, reflect on like how we want to connect, of course, but also like what the purpose of connecting is. So this is just like a guiding document to begin discussion. Everything can be changed, and I'll just leave it at that. So if you've had time since the last meeting to look it over, or if you have thoughts about how you want to take this. So if you remember, there's kind of the plan A, which included a key communicators group, or plan B, which included just adding more linkages instead of the key communicators. With the district having developed already a key communicators group to engage with, we do not have to go with additional linkages if we don't like it. We could do like meeting with the entire community where we just pick days in the evening and invite community members to share concerns and work on that. So I'll turn over 2 comments, questions, ideas. Which one?
You just said it.
Everybody.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the other group goes. Are we gonna be involved with that one?
Not directly necessarily. The intent is for us to bring together 25, 30 people who are maybe not intimately familiar with public education as a way to grow their understanding of public education, maybe advocacy for public education. So from a range of sectors across our community and backgrounds. It would happen on a monthly basis over 9 months. There would be a light book study using Jamie Vollmer's book, Schools Can't Do It Alone. And then just kind of a behind the screen peek at what it looks like to run a school district. You know, here's special education and finance, and here's what curriculum looks like and assessments, and just giving them a deeper understanding of the workings of schools to kind of cultivate greater understanding in our public. And maybe future board members for LPEF or the school board someday, or maybe encourage somebody to run for PTO president and be on district-wide parents, just to increase that awareness of public education and understanding in our community. I think there's people that are interested in kind of getting that deeper dive and looking at a way to do so. It was a program modeled off of Howard Suamico School District that's been very successful over the last 3 years, and as a way to engage the community, provide more information to folks. So excited for that. It's just 25 or 30 people, though. It's not, everybody. So.
That doesn't really satisfy our desire to
No, and there's always, I think, as an elected body, like in an alternate universe, if we had gone down the key communicators group route, it does feel kind of weird to be like, we're only communicating with these key people, and how do you pick and define that?
I don't disagree with that. I do think there is, and I don't even dislike the idea of the community at large. It just seems sometimes you get more engagement when people are invited versus just open. So then I guess we could just try it and see once what happens. If we don't get much, then maybe we could be more prescriptive on how we want to do that in the future. Just see once who shows up or how that dialogue goes, and then from there figure out how we want to refine it. Just because, again, we're going to go through the effort. We want to make sure we have people come to engage with us.
Yeah. So the idea of just adding more linkages with different groups does not resonate with anyone. For board members who have gone through linkages.
Yeah, I think we have trouble getting them to come the ones that already have, and so,
Yeah.
I mean, if we could improve that versus, then maybe take the extra step and do more. But
Are there districts out there where the board members are encouraged to set regular office hours? And this would be like published on our website if people wanted to come meet me, for example, during my office hours at Free Range Exchange downtown. Or, it's like somewhere up.
Yeah, I haven't heard of something like that before. I think there's individuals who have from time to time. They'll set up at a coffee shop and have an AMA or a, prove I'm wrong type of Reddit moment.
Change my mind.
Change my mind, yes. So I think there's some of that. In my experience, this board with linkages and the linkage process is more robust, kind of planful communication and dialogue than most school districts have. For most school districts I've been a part of, it's been a little more ad hoc, and I get coffee down at the BP every morning, and those are the people I talk to, or I work at the bank, and the people that come through are happy to tell me all they think about the school district, and use your personal and professional networks to garner information, know, so having an intentional network like our school board has had for many years is far more intentional than most school districts generally have. And then most school boards I've been involved with beef things up when there's referenda or something else, you know, to kind of expand that communication over a particular issue. And so I think it's hard to find examples of doing it better because there aren't a lot of examples of doing it better. If I think about other types of elected officials and what they do to engage with the community, you know, I know, you know, Representative Billings will have an open house or two or invite people in. You know, she's out in the community where she can be when she has time, but, you know, it's not some like really expansive public engagement process. You know, she relies on being a representative as much as anything else, as opposed to like a populist. I'm channeling the people.
And whoever comes, we just sort of mingle and chat with people and listen. I don't know.
Or in schools or something like that.
If you wanted to talk to a lot of people, I'd just go to the art game and hang out in the lobby, you know. I mean, I would go to the Central Logan basketball game and hang out in the lobby and, you know, like.
Although right after the art game is not when I would want to be asking one half or the other of the community how they feel about the district.
You know, go to an elementary music conference or performance and, you know, hang out in the lobby. I mean, like that's where people are naturally gathering and are present. If you wanted like access to a lot of district people, you know, those would be the sorts of like captive audiences you could set up a chair and talk to folks to. You all go to lots of these things already and talk to people at these things already, though, you know, so that's just a part of being an elected representative in our community. You don't necessarily need to do something special to accomplish that. You know, the senior citizens, you know, they don't come to some of these things. You could go to a nursing home and talk to folks, or go to a senior center and meet with folks if you wanted to. But, you know, lots of different ways to approach it.
It all made more sense to me years ago when I first was trained on all of this, because our job is to set policy. Our job is to set policy that matches with what the community would want for a policy. And then staff's job to fulfill that. And so the linkages, as I first learned by Linda, who apparently has changed her mind, was that linkages was our opportunity to communicate with the public to say, here's our values in our policies. Does this still match with what the community wants? And how you engage people in that is, there's lots of ways to do that. But when we had our training in May, when I asked that question, she goes, no. So I'm still a little, because we as elected officials can engage our public however we want to, as you said, Representative Billings or whoever. I mean, they have their ways of doing that. People can look up on the website and find our emails and phone numbers and contact us that way. So I'm struggling with, what is our purpose of the linkage? Is it to work on setting the values of the community in our policy, or is it to just be engage with the community? I'm struggling, and that's why and the reason I ask that question is then I think that helps me understand, like, if we just have an open house, like, what's the conversation? Why would people leave after they got home that night and kick their shoes off? Why would they put them back on and come out to see us? So that's what I'm struggling is, why would people want to come talk to us, and what's the conversation about?
I'll say from my perspective, I thought Linda had a very quick no with absolutely no explanation.
She did, kind of bugged me.
And my reading of the book would be more in alignment with kind of what your thoughts are. And when I look at that, like, owners, Board of Education, superintendent thing, you know, that linkages connect that owners to the Board of Education, and if policy is an explanation of values, then, you know, that's what you're getting from the public. I personally think that your perspective is relatively accurate. I don't know why she was so immediately dismissive.
We were just talking about the linkages that we have with our staff. I know she doesn't like that, for sure. versus.
I kind of, when I asked the question, I kind of set up, here's what you trained me when I was in Vail, Colorado in 2014 or whenever, or 2004, whatever year it was. And so I explained all that to her, and then I said, so that's kind of the purpose of linkages, right? And she goes, no. And then there was no, like you said, no follow-up. And I was kind of bummed out, because I thought that really made sense.
I think I'm still trying to figure out what's supposed to happen at linkages too.
Yeah.
I've only been to a couple, and it's, but it's our job to set policy that promotes student learning and success. And so some of the linkage is about helping whoever we're linking with understand what we're doing in our policy to do that, and also hearing from them whether the policy, whether the activities that are going on in their sphere, if they're students or teachers or staff or parents or whatever, are, whether our policies, I guess, supporting the places where our goals overlap in that way. But that is also like a value thing, like our values kind of zipping up here. So that's just to say I don't know either. That's what I took it to be. That's how I try to run them.
I think one of the tough things about using linkages solely to develop policy is you will only have a small number of people participating, and if you are thinking that they are speaking for the whole, you could develop policies that don't benefit the full community, you know, like, and that, I think as elected people, we run at-large races, like we have that connection and trust to do that policy development work. I think one of the things in the linkages that I've been in is so much of the comments are focused on like operations, like very much like Aaron's world. And it's really hard as a board member to sit there and you don't want to say like, I hear your concerns, but that's Aaron's role. Because people don't want to hear that, and it feels like you're scapegoating the superintendent, right? And so in the linkages, whatever the purpose of them, I think it's important to, whether we call out a policy, I don't want to spend the time like wordsmithing a policy with whoever shows up at a linkage. I think that would be
I don't think
ridiculous.
that's the venue for it.
But I think like, you know, Linda talked about like elevating the discussion and bringing it up to those like community visions and values, so that you can understand what the community is, you know, wanting and supporting and needing, and then take that, you know, to our home here and working on our policies at the board table.
I think linkages help us answer the question, how are the communities you serve informing your decision making? And I think where she was real quick with her no, from what I remember about how the question was asked to her, was more like, aren't linkages where we learn what our community wants so we can match our policy to that? And I think the difference there between trying to match the policies with what the community wants and being informed by the community when creating the policies is using their voices to help guide our decision making, but not having them make the decisions. For several reasons, just like you said, we're not talking about a homogenous group of people who all agree on the same values, but it is important that we hear from the community about what they think and what they value. And I think even with the really tough linkages with teachers and other people, where it feels like we sit there and eat sins for 45 minutes or more, it's important, even though a lot of the concerns they bring up aren't things that we would directly address as board members in our duties, I do think their concerns help inform how we interpret evidence, how we work with administration to make sure some of those things are addressed, not directly by us, but indirectly through them. I find them really valuable, and I guess all I'm saying is I think they're the way that we are informed by the community, so we can make better decisions.
And I think one of the pieces that we've missed in our linkages is that larger community connection, because we've got staff, we have students, we have the cultural community, local legislators, probably forgetting one.
Parents.
District by parents. But outside of that, the like formal connection, we might put in a community engagement plan of how the board will at least do this in addition to our individual, like that's the piece that I feel like we could this year have an opportunity to have something, whether that's like linkage, like we've done, or open house, or whatever. I think that's up to us to decide what that looks like.
I agree with reaching out more broadly. I support that effort to do that. I don't have any suggestions on it, and quite frankly, I think we got to try something, and we'll find out it's not perfect, and we'll continue to refine it over time. But at some point, we just decide we're going to do something, and whatever. We don't know what the perfect answer is, so I think we just have to collectively agree to. So I don't have any good suggestions what that is, but I would support that idea.
Do we want to commit to a handful of open houses spread across the district and maybe in district schools and invite community members to?
When we say open houses are, so what one of our policies here is about two-way communication, but open houses to me sounds more like listening sessions, which I also think is really valuable, where it's like we can ask follow-up questions, but the point is to have people come and share from their perspective, their experience, not speaking for groups, not generalizing across categories, but sharing, their experience, and we can glean from that as much or as little as we want about how widespread those experiences are, how shared they are. Or is there some other because there's lots of models of like open houses, town halls, whatever kinds of forums you want to come up with, and they have different purposes and different values in informing public discussion. So. I like listening sessions, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have all the words for all the different ways you meet with people in a group, but yeah, in my mind, when I think of what this could look like, it's more like a listening session. Maybe there's some guiding questions you could come with in your back pocket.
It could be thematic or topical, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I have kind of two thoughts, because one is generally, I like that, although I'd probably have it more like 3 instead of a handful, just because it gets to be a lot of linkages. But I think we have to think about the timing of it and the topics of it, because the Facilities Advisory Committee is looking at some difficult choices, and I don't want our intention of communicating with the public to be overshadowed by that, or maybe that would be one of the purposes. I think we have to think about the context that we're doing, and the time frame that we're doing this in, because if we're just, again, I don't have perfect answers, but I do think we have to give some consideration to that, because I don't want that, if we want to just talk about what's good for students, I don't want it to be overshadowed by, I don't want this school closed, or I think that school should close, or any of that stuff.
Yeah, the conversation needs to be facilitated to some extent to keep it on the rails, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I feel like 3 is pretty reasonable, or 2, if it was like fall semester, spring semester. And I do think you have a good point about, it kind of reminds me of survey fatigue, where, you wouldn't want to have a million mailers going out to community members. Your pool of respondents would shrink with each one. So we also wouldn't want to be engaging in outreach at a time when maybe there's significant key stakeholder work and facility advisory committee work, and there are numerous committees of community members working with the district on different things, and that would be something worth considering as we pick time and maybe topics of discussion. That is all stuff that we could decide without explicitly saying it in this community engagement plan. I guess really what I'm thinking of for moving forward with what we're going to do is Do we want to have, I guess generally it seems like everybody's interested in meeting with the full community in 2 or 3 meetings over the year. Listening sessions,
However we structure it.
maybe guided by theme or coming in with some questions similar to how we do the linkages. And if that all seems to resonate with everybody, I can add that into this and then we can work on it.
I mean, you could maybe even have, you've got some topics here with the key communicators group, and maybe those would be of, maybe not, I guess I
Yeah.
don't have a preference, but something to consider.
Okay, so we also have on our workshop agenda the linkage plan. And linkage meaning in the traditional sense, like who we have met with in the past in our linkages. So just a reminder, we have staff, we have students, we have district-wide parent committee, local legislators, and the cultural community linkage. We added last year, I believe, for the first time, an elementary linkage, a middle school linkage, and a high school linkage, so that staff had a chance to provide feedback to the board on years when they're not getting hit in our cycle. Attendance was low, but it was the first year we did it, so we could always continue and see if it picks up the second year as more people learn about it. We can discuss, I guess generally, are we feeling like the linkages that we already have are ones that we want to keep?
I like them. I mean, it looks really similar, I mean, what we've done in the past, like a number of years ago, and we struggled, oh Lord, we struggled with, is this the right group? Should we add this group? But at the end of the day, what you have is really the right group, and sometimes we get more attendance in some groups than others, and but we've made the effort, and if folks don't choose to participate, we can't force them. But I think it's a pretty, I mean, speaking from experience, we've gone round and round and round of trying to find other ways to engage more people in different ways, and it always kind of ends up coming back to this list. So I think it's a good list.
Okay, along with the linkage discussion, we do also have to talk about like our availability for a meeting. So with staff, we meet in the day, like the work day, which with working board has historically been a challenge. In this, I think I put something about, maybe I didn't, about at least like 2 to 3 board members should attend at each one, just to make sure that there's,
We've got some retired board members,
be at everyone.
more heavily in this corner.
Some newly employed.
Yeah. So that's just something to keep in mind as we decide. We're keeping these, as you plan your years, keep in mind that there will be linkages coming at like 3 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Where can we easily find the schedule of linkages laid out? Is it in the work plan? I know I had looked at it.
No, it is not. So Ms. Staggerwald reaches out to principals and they help select dates, is that correct? And then, I guess would it be helpful, Laura, if we gave you days that it's better, like just within our own personal schedules, like never on a Monday, never on a, or do you want to just keep it open and?
It's how you would like me to reach out to the principals. Historically, they choose a already established staff meeting,
Okay.
because usually staff are already planning on that date, but if that does not work for the current board members' schedules or availability and you want to mix it up, I will put out what we need to put out and we can always mix it up.
And my feeling is that the burden is a little more on us to be flexible to that if what we want is more people at the linkages, which is half the problem.
Yeah, they shouldn't be required.
I was just
Staff
gonna-
to come one night.
Right, right.
I was just going to suggest that at least for the youth serving org linkage, that we ask to be put on their agenda. They meet monthly, at least, or is it every Thursday? It's at least once a month those organizations are meeting together virtually anyway. If we could get on their agendas and host a listening session.
So these ones were additional that we could do if we wanted.
Yeah.
If you want to do the open house plus add another couple of linkages, like the ones that are on this single sheet document, we could.
I think the youth serving org one would be really good because they interact with the district so much.
Comments from
Certainly
other
reach
board.
out and ask what if they haven't already established meeting schedule and put it out.
They do, you could ask Bridget Todd Robbins. She could get you on the agenda, or get us on the agenda there.
Do you want to make that formal and add that to our calendar ahead of us?
I do.
Nodding,
Sure.
yes. Okay. All right. Linkage questions, typically the board approves the questions that are asked in the linkages. So the open house listening session idea, separate. The linkage thing, as we have done it before, is board approves 3 questions that are asked at each one. Staff usually all get the same questions. I think also the cultural community gets the same one as staff, and then the district-wide, no, the students get a different one. Technology was like one of the questions that made it into theirs.
The questions in the past have been about, what are you happy with the district, or I mean, aren't they kind of
It's
successes?
like
or?
barriers to student achievement, what are you proud of, and then a question, what have you learned as a result of the district's focus on educational equity, or something directly. I don't know if it says strategic plan for educational equity, but I know that Dr. Sprague had a question about that at a previous board meeting, like maybe the question isn't clear enough to elicit the responses that were.
As I remember from the feedback from the one staff linkage that I showed up, it didn't seem like there was a lot of, I don't know, the question didn't elicit the kind of responses we were hoping, which spoke to sort of a lack of, maybe a lack of focus in the question, I guess. I don't know. To me, that
I
was
feel
a
like
while
we could
ago.
update the questions.
Yeah, we absolutely could.
Yeah. And do they need to be the same questions every year?
I would hope
over
not.
year?
I would guess.
No, I mean, I think like maybe there's like an idea to like do a longitudinal look back at it. I don't know that that's ever occurred, but I think you change it depending on what you want to hear. You know, what kind of feedback you're looking for, or
Yeah, perhaps we have, points of interest that are just like out in the zeitgeist, right? That
Mhm.
we want to address here at home and say,
Yeah.
like,
I think the student one, the question about technology was after a referendum that supplied more, so we got more feedback from students than on do you like your laptops, do you like your iPads, and we heard a lot of really good comments about accessing information and barriers to that and stuff like that.
yeah.
I guess the first 2 questions that we tend to ask, barriers and what you're proud of, to me seem like great. A lot of the conversation tends to be in one. That 3rd question that we bring up is the one where I think there's an opportunity for wordsmithing or changing it up on what the focus is. And tonight we could discuss like what that focus should be, and then we could even like write out what it is, and then it would be approved in the next board meeting as the questions. So depending on board member energy level and desire to do that, we could totally draft that out.
I'm pumped.
You're pumped, okay, yeah, one pumped. Do you have ideas of what a good 3rd question would be?
So the first 2 questions were, again, what are the successes?
Yeah.
What are you
Barriers-
proud of?
Barriers to
to
academic
academic success. And didn't we ask like what makes you proud? to be part of the
That's the
discussion.
third
And
one.
that's the third one that is more or less helpful, I think. It's nice to know what people want to tout, but I think we're looking for a different kind of feedback. I mean, so for me, if we're able to target linkages differently each time with an improved set of questions, I would like to ask students about, mental health resources very directly, and their access to them, their comfortability with seeking them out, their level of knowledge about what the district provides.
Laura, could you send the historic questions to board members right now, and Dan, go up on that.
I have linkage question fatigue from 6 years ago, so. Because what you write, sometimes it just doesn't translate into conversation, so.
But I was thinking too, the technology one for students could be changed to something with mental health.
I think the technology question is a good one in general. It's something we should be checking in on regularly as technology is evolving, as what's out there for students to engage with changes, rapidly. I think that's something that should come back, but it's not necessarily useful to ask it every time, because we also can't just wholesale change out what technological tools are available in the classrooms year after year. Right.
Every 4 years.
I mean, that's already like, in terms of the pace of technological change, that's,
Frame up like a micro SWOT analysis, maybe not all of the letters.
okay.
Strengths, weaknesses, and ask what else people want to talk about. Like what else is on your mind?
I think the two questions about barriers and pride are the kind of strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly.
And they're open enough that students approach, at least, we've been with students and staff and or faculty, and
'Cause
faculty
people-
wanted to talk about something different, so we,
Yeah.
on the spot, ended up
Yeah.
What
having
have
an
we
open-ended
missed? What
question.
else do we?
What are your
because-
concerns?
Yeah, because people probably come with something in mind.
Yes.
And that's
Mhm.
why they're coming. And
Yes.
if they haven't said it in the first two questions, then maybe we give them one more chance to speak up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think even lead with like, what are your top concerns, right? As a member of the school district or something, I think even,
Question one, what are
Yeah.
your top concerns, then
Yeah.
move into barriers and what
Yeah.
you're proud of.
yeah,
Like Andrew.
I mean, I like that.
Have we ever, I don't see it exactly here, is there any reason or value to, again, directly asking the students in particular, and the words just flew out of my brain. I mean, like we see this on college professor course evaluations and things all the time. Are you happy with the quality of instruction that you received? Now, many of our students, even at high school age, are not necessarily in a good position of education and maturity to be able to answer that question in a really robust way, but
They often find ways
they
to
certainly have
change-
opinions about their teachers and things.
Well, and they often find ways to change that question at the college level, at least, because the research suggests that your race and gender have a lot to do with how people answer that question.
Absolutely, yeah, that's true.
So they shift to asking about learning environments, right?
Right.
Did you feel safe to ask questions in this
Right.
environment? Did you feel,
Which I
were
do
those
see here.
kinds
what-
of behaviors promoted rather than,
Right, and I think this
are you
one,
happy with your teacher?
Yeah,
Gave you a
this-
B on that essay?
the second to last one, I think, is a good one in that way. What do you think can be done to help students feel more welcome, safe, and included? And it's positively worded, it's proactive in that sense, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, back to your comment about leading with what's your concerns. We, in the past, were very careful how we crafted because we didn't want it to become a bitch session.
Yeah, that's true.
And so how do we get I mean, we do, that's why we kind of change it to what are the barriers
Yeah.
versus, and so I would just
That makes
caution on
sense,
that a
yeah.
little bit. And maybe turning that around is what's important to you.
Yeah. I like that.
And kind of put it more in a positive frame, because we used to ask questions like that, and it just became very unpleasant.
Yeah, as much as everybody likes to vent and wants a venue to gripe, it's not necessarily solutions oriented. And if people have a problem, they'll tell you all about it, but when you ask them for a solution to it, they'll either not have an answer, or they'll have thought very deeply about it and have a good idea. So.
Do we want to have any questions that ask those present, like, what should, I don't know,
We
like,
do.
what should the future, yeah, what should we do? So basically, like, what should the future of education in lacrosse be, or what do you envision as like
I think it's a
an
brilliant question.
important,
A vision question,
yeah.
Forward.
I like that.
Maybe then you can segue from some of the complaints to like help us come up with a solution.
And so is that a question for the students specifically, are we talking
No,
about?
I was thinking more of like
Okay,
staff. and
yeah, I was gonna
community.
say that's different
I think
stakeholders.
the students, I think of more as like, what would be interesting to me as a board member is like, how are you doing?
Mhm.
How are you,
Yeah.
academic, mental health, social? Do you feel like you're part of a community? Do you feel like we're equipping you with what you need to succeed in your
Right.
goals in life? You know, like, those are the things that like, it's hard to see in the reports we get.
Yeah, and that last question, even the way you phrased it, goes right to our mega results, right? And hearing it from them, I think, is a good idea.
I don't remember how I phrased it, so.
The future of education.
It's been recorded for eternity, so. we can
Oh,
find
yeah,
it.
good.
There's a plus to recording it.
Okay, so I guess, let's talk real quick about students and try to pick 3. Like general ideas, and then, unless you want to write out a question tonight and just have it ready to approve at the next board meeting. And then I'd like to do the staff one also, because I think that would also cover, typically we've had staff and cultural community be the same. Is that correct? Is
I
that
believe so.
familiar?
We've only done cultural community a couple times now,
Okay.
so it's still in its infancy.
Mm.
It was reading.
It's a really bad day.
It's true.
These are the 3 current questions.
No, or yes, yeah, because those have already been presented.
That was one of the historical ones here. What do you think can be done to help students feel more welcome, safe, and included? Because we want to avoid yes, no, right?
So
And
Trevor is referring to, Laura sent out an email just now to all board members that has a whole bunch of the past questions we've
Mhm.
asked at different points in time. What was the one, what number is it towards the bottom?
it's the
right?
second to last in the list.
And then the one you just said, if you feel like you have the tools you need to do well versus need.
Are we preparing you for all the things we say we're preparing you for? Right?
Do they know, though?
Well,
Do we know?
that's what's tough.
That's
but I
rough,
mean,
yeah.
at the level of seniors, maybe we do have students who are out there with job applications and are getting feedback, negative or positive, that they feel is directly tied to, a pre-professional experience they had, one of the vocational programs. Maybe that's asking a bit too much, but.
Yeah. I like the idea about asking about what's important to you. I like the one about the future of education. What do you think the future should look like?
Mhm.
Those are both good forward-thinking questions. I feel like that question is almost more useful to ask after somebody's graduated. And
Yeah.
they can see how it worked.
Yeah.
Right now it's kind of, and that's what I mean by do they know? It's just a speculative question.
Right.
Like, a lot of times we learn things we don't know if they're helpful until years later.
Oh, yeah.
We're like, oh, I needed that, I didn't know. So sometimes it's too soon to ask that question. Not that they don't sometimes tell us,
Mhm.
anyway.
What else did you want to ask?
I guess for staff and cultural community, we have barriers, what you're proud of, and then this visioning question. How rewatch this part and type out what exact words people like the most. That will be the one that'll be in the thing. And for students, there was a mental health question. Do you like the idea of just ripping the second to the last? What do you think can be done to help students feel more welcome, safe, and included? Those words feel like encompass the mental health idea? Okay, and then something related to, like, how has the district equipped you to pursue your life goals? Or instead of a yes, no, like, do you? We're getting rid of that one.
I don't think we'll get from it stuff that will help us very much. You know? Maybe I'm wrong there.
Well, I think we'll get some information, we just won't get the real,
Yeah.
I mean, you might hear that, I wish they'd have, yeah, pick, I don't know, something that, because that's going to be important on a college application. I don't know,
Right,
like,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Or
I guess
greater
it's hard.
support in
Yeah.
counseling, earlier on, college counseling or career counseling.
yeah, I mean, I
early
wish
on,
my
so-
guidance counselor would have recommended I did this when I was a freshman, or,
Yeah,
I think those are important. It's not going to give us everything that you're talking about, but
Yeah.
it'll give us something.
yeah.
So we do want it. Or we don't.
Will it ultimately help to inform our work for those types of answers?
I think it has the potential to direct resources to struggling programs or make the case for considering abandoning programs that are not working, well. I was looking also at the question, like, have you taken advantage of the future centers? I don't know if that's a thing we still have, right? If so, what was your experience? So, like, that's a really directed question that would help say, is this program working? Is it worth continuing to invest in? And that's important, right? It's really micro level in that question, but.
Are there any of those, like, so I think the response to the future center was like, probably was in the linkage questions because it was relatively new. The educational equity, relatively new. The technology issue gave some new stuff. Is there anything like that right now that we feel like we want more information and perspective on that's related to
Well,
current?
I think mental health is.
That was where I went.
Mhm.
Come front and center, especially after,
Yep.
after COVID.
Yeah, that's what the students were talking about,
That's what they were talking
talking with them
about.
on the campaign.
Yeah.
So,
So we've got mental health. What do we want the other ones to be? We could ask the barriers and what are you proud of?
Yeah.
We could keep technology in there too. I mean, my experience of the student linkages is they don't, like they do, I don't know how to phrase this.
They don't like the walls that are put up for
The firewalls.
when,
Yeah.
Yeah,
when they do
but also they-
searches or there's Wi-Fi issues.
Mhm.
There's more opportunity to ask questions of them and receive direct comments than there are in staff linkages. Staff have things they want to discuss, and that's going to happen for the hour. Students are
Yeah.
very open to, like,
Mhm.
here's the question, give us a response. You know what I mean?
So, as a board member, the technology one doesn't tell me as much, because that's staff's job, not my
Mhm.
job. When you get into the nitty-gritty, which is probably what they're gonna comment on, I would really like us to keep the question, that historical one about people feeling safe and included or whatever.
Mental health.
And I would like a separate mental health question. I think those are different things. I think the mental health question is about anxiety, about,
Overwhelm,
I
yeah.
think we should have a mental health question, and I think it should be more mental health directly focused versus just the inclusion piece and feeling safe piece. I think it is about, again, I'm terrible at wordsmithing questions, but some question to ask about, do you feel you have support on the days that you're struggling with a blue day or a especially anxious day,
Yeah.
or a day that do you have, the days that you have a hard time coming to school because of what's going on in your head, do you feel the support to be able to get through that day? Or I don't,
So,
again,
no, I agree with you, but I think, so the way that you're directing the question now would give us the kind of feedback about how many of our students are struggling with these things, which is valuable in one sense. We could phrase the question in a way to talk about the resources that we have or don't have, and whether or not they are or are not aware of them or able to access them.
I like where you're going.
How do you feel the mental health resources provided for you?
I would ask something more like, in what ways have you engaged the mental health resources available in the district?
How have they been of value to you?
Have,
or other
yeah,
students?
have they been, and even, are you aware of the mental health resources?
Are we
available?
concerned that students will be sharing something private in front of a group? Like, do we think that a student
Yeah,
will be
there's
like,
disclosure,
yes,
and
here,
yes,
done
I've
these
talked to
things, you know
a
what I mean?
counselor, yes, I've.
Or asking students to say things out loud that they may not, like to get the
Right.
type of answers we want.
Right, right.
They're-
Yep, that's,
We do get a survey results as part of the information we receive throughout the year that, what is it the social emotional learning survey, what's it called?
Youth risk behavior.
Youth
Campus
risk.
climate, maybe?
Yeah, we
That's
do
what they
get
call
a
it.
survey that asks all of these questions and we get the data.
yeah,
And it asks things like, you know, is there an adult on campus that you trust? Things that are sort of linked to, metrics that are linked to sort of success and support in
Mhm.
school.
Suicide ideation, all of that sort of stuff.
yeah.
But I think you could ask the mental health questions in a way about resources and not about, I personally had this or that, but do you feel the resources meet the students' needs? Again, you could say it more vaguely and more openly,
I
in a
mean,
way without
but
an
again,
individual
so,
having to
and I
disclose.
know it's not the exact phrasing we would get, but like that sort of yes or no, are the resources good enough? I don't
Or how
see
do they meet,
quite
are
how
they,
valuable that is for us, but I should have thought of the disclosure issue right away, because I think you're right. And if we're getting anonymized survey results on a wide variety of specific resources and mental health issues showing up, that's, I think, the best practice for getting that kind of information. So.
My only concern with asking a more general question of students related to how they feel mental health services, are they adequate or are they not? I don't want to lend the impression to them that we can take their feedback and come back here and have the power to
Right.
fix whatever they
Right.
think needs to be fixed right away.
We're also asking them to maybe compare it to an ideal situation that they don't even, that doesn't exist, and they wouldn't even know what it looked like, right? So.
And then we could always ask questions about things that we know can improve feelings of belonging and safety and like general, like how you feel. Like we could, students at the last linkage I was at really wanted to talk about clubs
Mhm.
and time to meet with their peers and be involved in all sorts of different clubs and how clubs were meeting at the same time, so they'd have to pick, and they didn't really like that and the limitations there, and like being part of a club and having all those community building opportunities are like essential for, you know, if you're participating,
Mhm.
that can improve.
As we just learned in our last meeting from Dr. Lahaki,
Right.
participation in 2 or more extracurriculars and co-curriculars, right?
So I think there are ways where we could, like, receive information that would maybe help us understand how students are doing, and if what we are doing is helping them,
Mm.
without like putting them on the spot and saying like, how many times have you gone to the counselor?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Because mental health came up in the student linkage just by asking what barriers do students
Exactly,
I mean,
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. that's a
to
question.
let them bring it up rather
Yeah.
than us pointedly ask them to talk about it.
Mhm.
so do we feel like just saying barriers, what you're proud of, and then what do you think can be done to help students feel more welcome, safe, and included is enough to drive conversation?
Yeah. I still think we should finish them all by just saying what else is on your
And
mind.
then what else?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Open it up.
Yeah.
That's how you start writing conferences. How's it going?
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. So then for staff, we're thinking barriers, what you're proud of, and then I'm sorry, I don't remember what you all
The
wanted
fu-
for the
questionable.
future thing. Was that a yes or a no? I feel like there was
I like
still
that
mixed.
one. I like it.
How did we, what do you envision the future of lacrosse education to be? Is that sufficient, or is there a different way?
So the
Or
first two
wordsmiths?
questions are asking for the staff's perspective on the students. And obviously that's our responsibility, right? Do we want to ask a question that's about their opportunities as professionals and development? Is that appropriate for us to ask as the board?
They will answer that. I mean, when you ask about barriers to education, they will talk about it.
They'll
Oh,
say
sure.
they need more training or they.
Right. Okay, so that might be enough.
Do we want to have any additional concerns, question for them too? We usually run out the hour pretty fast, but we could throw it in there as just an extra if there's time.
Time permitting, yeah, I would be all right with that.
Okay, we'll do that. So I think that generally covers the major groups that we'll need to start scheduling with, and I can write up those questions and then give them to you, Laura, so that they'll be in the next board meeting to approve. So just to wrap up, we've got the questions. We've decided on continuing the linkages that we had before. So that's the staff linkages that are rotating, in addition to every year in elementary, a middle, and a high school. We would meet at 5, and staff would come on their own time to that one. Our student linkages, the district-wide parent committee linkage, local legislators linkage, cultural community linkage, and then we've added youth serving organizations linkage. And we're doing listening sessions.
It's a lot.
Does that seem like what we discussed? Is that, any other thoughts on those things? No thoughts? Then those are the things I'll put in this. Any other?
Are we doing a separate one for cultural community?
Do we want to intentionally do a separate one for the cultural community?
Do you think we'd get a better turnout rate if we held that one virtually?
Maybe.
Potentially. I mean, barriers to access are generally more pronounced in the communities that are listed here.
Well,
so.
and if we hold them at their facilities, I think we need to
Mhm.
get in these to go to the individuals versus individuals coming to us is always.
Yeah.
There'd
Part
be
of
too
the
many, we'd be
agenda.
adding like.
I think,
So
like
would
Katie
we
said
just-
earlier,
would we
yeah, getting on
rotate
the
through the
agenda.
different facilities? Because we have several local organizations explicitly listed that we invite.
There could be more added
Just
to
ask
this
one of
list.
them to host it, and another year ask another one to host it.
I like the idea of virtual.
I think we should see how it goes. I think we should try it
Which one?
virtual.
I know, it's hard to do conversation online.
Again, yeah, and it's
But-
not ideal, but if it gets more of us in front of more of them,
Mhm.
I think that's important.
And we can always say, if the virtual is not the best way for you to communicate, we will have these listening sessions, please come, to that too.
Yeah, and really invite them, like, don't feel confined to just this specific
Yeah.
linkage,
Okay?
Virtual's better than not having them. I just don't love them as much.
Yeah.
Kind of virtual for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Like literally nobody came last year, and it was at the public library. Laura, before you send that invite out, I could probably add some context to the list.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Before you add the invite out for the community cultural groups one, I could help add some context to the list.
Okay. I can share out my current list. I'm sure it needs updating and additions,
Perfect.
deletions,
Mhm.
adjustments.
Awesome.
Okay. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're done. Thanks,
Still
everyone.
pumped.
Aaron, I'm afraid you're gonna fall asleep at